You're listening to the Footy First podcast on TSN 1050. Champions live here.
That's right, folks. It's Saturday, and that means one thing here on TSN 1050. It is time for Footy First. Nick McVicar holding it down solo once again. Nico had a preseason game rescheduled, unfortunately, for this morning, so he will not be able to attend, but just like last week, don't worry, he did send me his picks, so we will hear from him later in the show. We got a lot to talk about today. First, I want to get ahead of it. We do have a winner of our TFC ticket giveaway. I will be announcing that later in the show. Also joining us later, League One player from North Mississauga, Bradley Ogbevuon, is going to be joining us in studio. He will be here in about a half hour. And we also got a chance to speak to Mark-Anthony Kaye. I had the opportunity to sit down with him yesterday and talk. We will play that interview in just a little bit. But the biggest story in soccer in Canada this week was the Heritage Committee meeting that took place on Wednesday. It is such a big story. Sorry, I apologize. It took place Thursday. This is such a big story. It's the first time that Soccer Canada has faced the Heritage Committee. 4 players from the women's national team did sit in on the Heritage Committee meeting and were asked questions by members of Parliament of our great nation to try to figure out how we have gotten to the point that we are at. Christine Sinclair, Janine Becky, Sophie Schmidt, and Quinn all sat down and were berated with questions. Berated's a harsh word. They were asked questions regarding Canada soccer, their treatment over the past countless number of years for these players, and how we've gotten to this point. And there's a lot of great audio coming from it. I'm going to play some in a bit. Give these players credit. They sat there for 2 hours. 2 hours. And were asked question after question to try to get to the bottom of it. And a couple things stood out. One, they were very, very well prepared. They had everything ready to go. They knew what they were doing. Another thing that stood out, the MPs on the other side, for the most part, not all of them, but for the most part, were not prepared. The questions that were being asked were not useful in the meeting that was happening. They were not getting to the point that needed to be got. And it was very disappointing to see that the MPs did not take this as seriously as, say, the Hockey Canada Heritage Committee meeting that took place. And the other thing that came out of this that a lot of people will be kind of open to hearing is that this is a huge issue. This is. We've talked about it countless times on this show. We're going to continue to talk about it on this show. But this issue is not just a one-off. This is not just the this year sort of issue. This is not just the women saw what the men got in the World Cup and want the same thing. No. This goes back way further than what is currently being talked about. This is decades in the making. And you wonder why we had some incredible talents go play for different countries internationally. It's these kind of issues where Soccer Canada has potentially taken advantage of both the men's and the women's national teams. Again, this is not the first time we've had issues, but the fact that the budgets have been cut for both national teams for, at the very least, the last 3 years, that's a serious, serious issue. And I want to get into some of the audio, as I said. So we're going to start off with Christine Sinclair, who I thought did a great job as the leader of the team, as the captain. She had the opening statement and a couple other statements in between. They're kind of mashed together. But let's hear what Christine Sinclair had to say at the Heritage Committee meeting.
For many years, we have been forced to negotiate in the dark. Canada Soccer's approach has reflected a culture of secrecy and obstruction. As players, we are constantly told that our compensation, or lack of, was all that Canada Soccer could afford. I've never been more insulted than I was by Canada Soccer's own president, Nick Bontis, last year, as we met with him to discuss our concerns. I was tasked with outlining our compensation ask on behalf of the women's national team. The president of Canada Soccer listened to what I had to say, and then later in the meeting referred back to it as, quote, "What was it Christine was about?" To me, this spoke volumes about the lack of respect Canada Soccer has for its women's national team. As a team, we do not trust Canada Soccer to be open and honest as we continue to negotiate for not only fair and equitable compensation and treatment, but for the future of our program.
Very strong words. Very strong words. This is the captain of your national program. This isn't just another player. This isn't just someone who barely made the squad. This is someone who represents the national team better than almost anybody has ever represented the national team. And in a meeting, the president of Soccer Canada, Nick Bontis, who I'm not going to say anything about his character. I don't know the man. He could be a great individual. I really do not know. But after Sinclair gave probably a very well-spoken speech, he referred back to it later that she was, using foul language. What was she complaining about? That's the word I'm going to use. That's unacceptable. This isn't just, at the time, he wasn't just some official of Soccer Canada. He wasn't a high-ranking official. He was the president. And this is how the president is talking about one of the most decorated Canadian soccer players of all time. The person who has the most goals internationally for our country. The person who has the most goals internationally of any women's soccer player of all time. But she's complaining in accordance to our former president, Nick Bontis. Janine Becky also had some very well-spoken parts in the Heritage Committee meeting as well. And one of them was about being successful despite Canada Soccer, not because of it. And here's what she had to say.
We have been successful not because of our federation, but actually in spite of our federation for so many years. And we have, like we had said in our opening statement, been successful with less and been expected to do more with less. And I think we just got to a point where we are so sick and tired of having to fight the same battle and have the same conversations and scratch and claw for transparency when, that should just be expected and given when asked for.
Scratch and claw for transparency. That's something that took me by surprise hearing that. Because as outsiders, as fans, as media members, I understand maybe we don't get to see all the inner workings. Maybe we don't get to see all of the financials. I can accept that. Why are the players having to scratch and claw? Why are the people who are representing our country, who this women's national team is the reigning Olympic champions? They have been incredibly well run from a team perspective for over 20 years. They've had numerous successes on the national front. And yet they have to scratch and claw for transparency from the governing body. It's unacceptable. This is where we're at. And I can't wait to hear from who else might have to speak from Canada Soccer. But Rick Westhead, who our senior correspondent here at TSN, did a great job breaking it down on SportsCenter Thursday night. And he had this to say about what happened in the meeting and kind of what was brought up.
We're going to get more testimony in the next couple of weeks. I understand that on March 20th, Canada Soccer's General Secretary, Earl Cochrane, and likely Nick Bontis, who resigned on February 27th as Canada Soccer's president, those two executives at least are likely to be called to testify. Interesting moment or two during today's hearing was when players were asked, well, who else should this committee call to testify? And they said, any executives who were involved in the negotiation between Canada Soccer and a private company called Canadian Soccer Business for the media and sponsorship rights to both national teams. they should be called, as well as any Canada Soccer board member who approved it. Also interesting that Christine Sinclair and the other players said yes when they were asked whether Victor Montagliani, Canada Soccer's former president, who is now a senior official with FIFA, should be called to testify as well.
So there you have it. The players are saying we need to hear from all of these people. Anyone who is involved in the deal with CSV, anyone who is involved in the budget cuts, anyone. We want to hear from every single person and how it was approved, how it got to this point. Because we're kind of at the point where it's no longer acceptable. And he went on to say what could come of this as well. And I thought Rick did a great job. So here's what he had to say about that.
Well, this is really interesting because FIFA has its own specific rules about what it calls government interference. We've seen countries like Zimbabwe and Kenya be suspended by FIFA, sanctioned by FIFA because of this purported interference. So does Canada kind of belong in a club with those countries? Not sure. We're going to have to wait and see about whether they'll follow through. It was, again, interesting. So many interesting moments in this hearing today. Quinn was asked whether our own government, our own sport minister's office had reached out, but that the players had not responded to the minister's team about a potential audit of Canada Soccer and whether the players would support that. The reason Quinn said that the players had not responded was they were worried about these government interference rules and the possibility, I don't know how remote it is, that Canada could face maybe even expulsion from the Women's World Cup this summer.
So now we know why the women didn't want the government to be involved. Because there is a chance that because of having government involvement, they could be removed from the upcoming Women's World Cup. It's an extreme case. I don't necessarily see it happening in this specific case, but that's what FIFA has. And that we can get into a conversation about the issues with FIFA at another time. That's not what we're talking about right here. What we're talking about is the fact that these four women did a great job covering and answering every question that was thrown their way, even if the questions weren't always great. Now it's time for Soccer Canada to step up and answer some questions of their own, because they are the ones who have put themselves in a very, very bad spot. We're going to take a break here. On the other side, I sat down with Mark-Anthony Kaye, TFC midfielder and obviously Canadian national team player, was at the World Cup in Qatar. I got a chance to speak to him about his time in Qatar, his time with TFC, what it's like being back with the club and being back under Coach Bob Bradley. We'll get into that on the other side. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding down the fort solo this week. Nico has a game today, preseason game, but he will be back next week, and he did send me his predictions, so we will hear from him in just a little bit. But as I mentioned before, yesterday I got the opportunity to talk with Mark-Anthony Kaye, TFC midfielder and Canadian national team midfielder as well. It was a great conversation, and here's how that went. Joining us now on Footy First, it is one of the Canadian national team members who ventured over to Qatar, played in the World Cup, also midfielder for TFC, Mark-Anthony Kaye. How's it going today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Really appreciate you taking some time to talk to us. We've been following the TFC preseason and now first two matches. What's the atmosphere around the team right now?
Yeah, obviously, we had a really good preseason, gave us a good amount of time to reconnect with each other, create better understanding and chemistry on the field, get guys more comfortable with how we're trying to play. So that was really important. Obviously, looking back at the first two games of the season, we would obviously want the results to go a different way. DC was a completely different game than Atlanta. In both games, there's a common theme of when we've gone up and then conceded goals. So we've understood that there needs to be a little bit more understanding in those moments of what we need to do to keep hold of a lead. But, it's been a positive start to the season in the sense of how we want to play, especially considering the last game in Atlanta. We understood that last year defensively we weren't too solid, so it's been a big thing to try and shore up the back line and stop allowing so many goals in. So I think in Atlanta we really showed the resilience to compete and defend and make it difficult for teams, but now we need to add the attacking part and allow our attacking players to start scoring goals and creating more opportunities. So 2 games into the season, not the best start, but from a footballing standpoint, we have some really good ideas, and it's just about continuing to work on them.
That's great to hear that the team is still so focused on the overall goal. I want to focus in a little bit more on your career before we move forward, and this is now your second time being with TFC. Do you feel any added pressure playing for a Canadian club as a Canadian player?
I wouldn't say pressure. I think, there's a responsibility for us to go out there and give it our all every day, every game, understanding that, we're playing for our hometown. If you think of me, Oso, and Richie, 3 prominent Canadian players on the team that we grew up in this area, so we know what it means. We know what football means to this city, so we want to do as much as we can to continue pushing it in the right direction and bring TFC back to the top of the mountain where we know we deserve to be. So I wouldn't say it's pressure, it's more responsibility, and we've taken that responsibility on, and we're happy to suit up every weekend. So yeah.
I like the way you put that, responsibility. It's probably a better word than I used. In conversation with Mark-Anthony Kaye, and you joined the club last year in July, around the same time as the Italian duo of Bernardeschi and Insigne joined the squad. After you joined, the club went on a pretty nice run of picking up points in 8 of 11 matches. Can you talk about kind of how the atmosphere was around the club at that point, how excited you could feel the guys in the squad, even just the fans outside were, bringing you as well as Insigne and Bernardeschi in around the same time?
Yeah, you could feel a huge shift, I think, that the club was looking for when, a bunch of us came in at that time. We really felt like we had the right pieces to end the season on a high note and get into the playoffs. We knew it was going to be difficult. We knew that you needed to be near perfect in order to do so. But with the talent that was brought in, with myself included, I felt like we had the tools we needed to get the results. It's unfortunate with injuries and stuff, but I do remember that game, Charlotte at home when we all played, and just the atmosphere at the stadium was unbelievable. It was like almost like it was a season opener. It was like the first game of the season. So you could definitely feel that there was a shift at the club, and that's what the management were looking to create. And now it's about us making sure that we continue pushing that movement in the right way and that we get the results that the club wants us to get.
I'm glad you brought up the management, because my next question rolls kind of nicely into that. I mentioned earlier this is your second time with TFC, but this is also your second time playing under Bob Bradley, as you were playing with him at LAFC as well. Have you seen a different mentality on his coaching style in between LAFC and now with TFC?
I think at LAFC we had a group of some experienced players, but also a larger group of younger players that were relied on more heavily when we were at LAFC. And, we were learning a new way of football and taking in ideas really quickly. And, there was a lot of coaching being done because we were all young, and needed to be coached. I think now Bob understands the team they've been able to create has a lot of experience that can take ownership on the field in certain situations and know how to deal with certain things when they come up. So the coaching style hasn't changed, but I think his idea of how he wants the team to engage with each other, and how he wants us to kind of, the word I use is ownership, take more ownership on the field to solve problems is different than when I was at LAFC, because you look at the locker room we have maybe one of the most experienced teams in the league, when you look at our starting 11. So, not a big coaching change, but more putting the responsibility on the players to really figure out ways to find results in certain moments and be able to be cleaner. But Bob's football ideas are the same, and I love that I'm able to be with a coach who I get along with very well.
Is it weird to have Bob's son on the team as well? Obviously, Michael being the captain. Is there any odd interactions between the two of them in training, or have they just kind of seamlessly done the father-son to coach-player transition?
Yeah, honestly, if you didn't know they were, father and son, I don't think you would be able to see any difference in their relationship. They're very professional when they step on the field, and they demand the same amount of respect and, high standards from each other. So for me, I've known Michael for a long time. He was there when I was at the academy, so I know what he's all about. And then, I went on my own different path and ended up connecting with his dad at LAFC and figured out what he's all about. And they're very similar, but at the same time, very different. And like I said, the respect is the biggest thing. I think in order for any work relationship to work, there has to be respect, and they definitely show that a lot.
In conversation with Mark-Anthony Kaye, TFC and Canadian midfielder, the Canadian or the midfield trio that you guys have currently running with TFC of you, Oso, and Bradley, it's one that has a lot of history in it. And I want you to talk about maybe how that history and knowing these guys for as long as you have has helped you in your career, and what the difference was when you went to LAFC and then subsequently Colorado as well, and how that is kind of nice to come back to.
Yeah, the relationship I've had with Oso, different than the one I had with Mike. Oso, always looked up to him as a player of what he was able to do, his ability to influence games in different ways. We kind of came to TFC at the same time, and I went to the academy and he moved to the first team. So I've always been fond of him and just watching his rise in the league and what he's been able to do to put Canadians on the map. I really think he was the first one to do it. And it really inspired me to help, Canadians get a better rep in the league. And so to be able to watch him and then now be able to play with him and play with him at the national team, there's a huge mutual respect between us. We really understand how each other want to play. He demands the best out of me. And I think that's the biggest thing between the three of us is we respect each other so well that we can just go straight to the other person and tell them honestly how things need to change or what we think without without thinking the person's not going to take it the right way, which I think is huge for development and pushing a team in the right direction. And then, Oso and Mike have known each other for the longest time, so their relationship I can't speak on, but it's definitely something where they understand each other. Probably don't even have to speak to know where the other person's going to be on the field. And then with Mike, it was the same thing. He came to TFC when I was already there, and, just his leadership role, his ability to assert himself at this club and demand, a change in the standards and getting people to be the best professionals every day and have high training level and intensity, was something that I wanted to mimic as I grew in my career. So to be able to be with them now is amazing, and I love how everything's come full circle. And then, my time at LAC was different. I had younger guys around us. We were all trying to make a name for ourselves, and, it just worked really well. The dynamic we had in the midfield there, high pressing, high intensity. It worked. Football changes. I don't know if the same three midfielders would do as well right now in this league. Things change and players get better and you have to adapt. And then in Colorado, it was a different kind of idea of how we wanted to play. And it was less about, the midfield relationship and more of the overall team relationship. So I'm definitely happy to be on a team where the midfielders have a little bit more responsibility to make sure everything is clicking. They're kind of the engine of the team like it was at LAFC.
Absolutely. In conversation with Mark-Anthony Kaye, and you mentioned Oso being one of the first Canadians to really make a mark in the MLS from a growth perspective. Obviously, D-Row and those guys before coming back to the league is a little bit different. You guys have grown so much on the national program over the past 5 years, and obviously it showed when you got the opportunity to go over to Qatar. Kind of tell the fans, like, what was that experience like for yourself, just being in Qatar with the boys, with the squad, and what it was like to do it with guys that you've kind of grown through the system with?
Yeah, no, it was an amazing experience. You know, it's something you dream of. You know, I'm sure every young soccer player in the world dreams of playing in the World Cup. And it was a far-fetched dream for us Canadians growing up here in the soccer structure that was created. But, you know, we really believed and dug deep and went on our own path, which I think is the special thing. We all took different paths to lead us back to the national team. But getting over there was just an amazing feeling, amazing accomplishment to look around the room and see all the guys who have different stories, similar to yours, but different in their own way. And just, you know, this brotherhood and a group of guys who, you know, made each other's dreams come true. You know, you'll never forget those players. So that was a beautiful experience of just being there. And then the idea of playing against top teams in the world, like that's how you want to test yourself. That's how you want to remember your career. And I was just very grateful that I got minutes in that World Cup. And, you know, I worked really hard to be able to put myself in a situation like that. And, you know, we'll take what we learned from it. It was definitely bittersweet emotions, obviously, because, you know, we're all playing in a World Cup. We're excited. We're on the big stage. Our family's there. Canada's there. You know, the country is watching. But at the same time, we're competitive. We want to win. We want to get out of our group. We want to feel even more proud of where we are at the end of the World Cup, you know. So I think it was a good introduction, but we're definitely really hungry for 2026 and definitely leaving a bigger impact on the world stage.
All right, before we go, I just got to ask, do you have any like vivid memories from that time in Qatar, something that you're going to take with you forever?
I think the best memory for me, it was definitely when we scored, when Alfonso scored against Croatia. Just the amount of emotions running through my body at that time, just sprinting over into the corner. Like, it was just, that was a goal for the entire country. That was a goal for every person who sacrificed the last 5 years, you know, staff, people who worked at the CSA, everyone to get us to that point. You know, family members, wives, sons and daughters who missed out on times with their fathers because of how long the journey was. Like, that goal was just for everyone, and to experience that in person was a gift. So that was definitely the best moment.
I love it. I don't think we can end on any better note than that. Mark-Anthony, really appreciate you taking the time today to join us, and we wish you luck the rest of the season.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have a good day.
You as well. That was my conversation with Mark-Anthony Kaye yesterday. Very well-spoken, loved his insight about Bob Bradley, about the midfield trio of him, Oso, and Michael Bradley, Bob's son. Always funny to hear that they're on the same team. Some Canadian men's team news as well from Canadian Soccer Daily. According to Turkish reports, Canadian captain Atiba Hutchinson will retire come season end, and he has reportedly also asked his club Besiktas to donate his salary towards building a school in the local earthquake zone. A legend through and through, Atiba Hutchinson. We're going to take a break. On the other side, former North Miss League One player Bradley Ogbevuon joins us in studio, and we will talk to him about his time in League One and what might be next for this young player. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding it down by myself. Nico is in a match early this morning down in Houston on preseason, so he will be back next week. But I'm not alone for this segment. Don't worry, folks. You don't have to listen to me blather on for 15 more minutes. Joining me now is League One Ontario player Bradley Ogbevuon, former North Miss, former Pro Stars, and former trialist with Valor FC. How's it going today, Bradley?
It's going really good. I'm feeling great this morning. Thank you for having me in.
Yeah, happy to. We've been working on this for a few weeks now. Schedules have been kind of hard to figure out, but we finally have you in here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your time in League One, because obviously League One is such a big, booming market right now for players. Actually, yesterday announcement that League One Alberta will be starting this year as well with 4 clubs. So it's a great time to be in League One. Right. Tell us a little bit about your time in League One with North Miss, with Pro Stars, and how you got to where you are right now.
My experience was really good. I was overseas for a while. I was out in Portugal for about 2 years. I was playing in the first division over there with Belenenses, the U19 side. Around the time I was going to sign a contract, there was a bit of a severance between the staff and my agent at the time, so I had to come back, as well as with the mixture of COVID. So I was looking for some good competition that I could still stay in shape with, because obviously I still have an aspiration for football. I still pursuing the professional side of things. So League One was my option, and I had some history with North Miss as a youth. So
me too.
Yeah. So yeah, I just put my trust in that club and I went over there, and it was a pretty good experience. Eventually, I did leave. In the last season that just finished, I went over to Pro Stars. Pro Stars was a really good experience. We made it up until the first round of playoffs, and we had a good run, but unfortunately, we fell short. But, it happens. But it was a great experience. It was a great coach, good club, and great environment, because one thing I was looking for was somewhere where we could train and get better, and we trained 5 times a week. And it was early in the morning, 9 a.m. trainings, and for that, I really appreciated that. But overall, great experience, to be honest. I can't say anything bad. As you can see, a lot of players are graduating into, the professional side of things, and I'm trusting it right now. I'm trusting it.
That's the way to go. You talk about your time in Portugal. You talk about your time in League One. How does the League One experience kind of compare to the quality of Portugal, just for people who may not really understand?
The quality, I can say in terms of talent, there's definitely a lot of talent over here in Canada and League One. So much talent. There's just a bit of a culture difference in how players go about their careers. Like over there, from very young, they're conditioned to move like a professional from a very young age. So you see guys carrying their boot bags under their arm, doing all those little things that you see professionals doing, and just taking it very serious. It's almost like a celebrity side to it. But it transfers over to the game. Like, they take it very serious. The intensity is always high. You never see guys lacking. Over here, we have a bit of we're exposed to different things, different ways of making money, and we're distracted by, going out with friends and stuff. So, sometimes when you're training here, you could find that some environments isn't as serious, but the talent, on a talent level, there's so much talent here. Arguably, I've seen a lot of talent just out of Brampton alone, compared to
the hotbed that is Brampton all of a sudden. It's truly incredible to see some of the talent coming out. You got an opportunity recently to go on trial with Valor in their open trials.
I did.
Can you speak on that for people who, A, don't know what open trials really are, and if that's a real opportunity for them,
right.
And B, talk about kind of what it took, what you got out of it, and maybe what the next steps have been for you.
Definitely when you're, as a player, you want to get into something that you can trust. You don't want to be snubbed of any opportunity. I did a lot of research behind their open trials, and their trials it seemed pretty legit. I actually know one goalkeeper that I was on trials with in Portugal back in 2018. He actually came up through the Valor trials, and he's actually a Winnipeg native. He stays over there. And yeah, he made it. He did really well. He's a really good keeper, one of the best keepers I grew up with. But yeah, it was a legit opportunity. It definitely was. And the coach and staff, the way they set up the trainings and the evaluation process, everything it looked really well. It looked good. It was very structured. some players, they go to these open trials and maybe they don't hear anything back from these teams. But realistically, in that world, you do gain from it. You gain a lot from it. And the biggest thing you gain from it is a profile. So, if you play well enough, even if you're not picked up, you see them taking the notes on you, they do keep you on the radar. So, I did really well there. I did do well. I had confidence in that. I do think, they're going to be watching me this League One season because I'm going to be playing another League One season here. But, you can definitely gain a lot from an open trial, even if you're not getting called back directly to a training camp. You're building your portfolio, something to add to your player resume, which you see is very important today, as well as video.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but a lot of people, they can trust it for sure.
That's good to hear because obviously the CPL is still new, 5 years in, and a lot of Canadians don't really understand how trials work. Let's be honest, that's kind of just our system. In conversation with Bradley Ogbevuon, you had that chance to do trials with Valor. Now you're kind of looking towards the next season. You said you're going to be playing in League One.
Right.
What is your end goal? Do you want to play in the CPL? Do you want to maybe make the trip back over to Europe potentially? Obviously, you've had time in Portugal, but is there kind of an end goal for you for the end of this season, maybe?
The end of this season, I'd really like to get my foot back in the door. I definitely trust my talents. I trust my abilities. But you still have to be humble in this game. So getting my foot back in the door is what I'm looking at, and whether that be with the CPL, a CPL team, a USL team, even if it is going back to Europe, it's just to get my foot back in the door, grind it out for a season, and just keep moving up like that. But I would love a CPL because, who doesn't like being close to home?
Yeah, who wouldn't love playing? It's always funny that we talk about it because, that wasn't an option for guys forever.
Yeah.
This is still brand new.
Right.
It's got to be really cool to be able to see professional players playing in and around your hometown, right?
Right, it is.
Yeah. So before we let you go here, Bradley, I got one more question for you. I always like asking this from professionals and from players in general.
Right.
What's your lasting memory, one thing that you've always remembered from your youth career or from your time in Portugal, whatever it is, one memory that you will hold on to for the rest of your life?
A memory I'll hold on to for the rest of my life. I would say this is a turning point in my career where can I say two or one?
Oh, absolutely, two.
Okay. So the first one is, I've been playing soccer for a long time. My dad put me into it from young because he's seen some of my, athletic abilities as a toddler, sprinting around the house, little things like that. But I remember just getting into soccer. I was a little bit skeptical, how it's going to go and all that. But I went into my first house league game at 6 years old, and my whole family was there, and I absolutely balled out. I scored 18 goals, I believe, in one game. Yeah, that memory would definitely stick with me forever. And that was a turning point for my dad as well, where he's like, you have to stay in this. You have to keep going with this. Eventually, I fell in love with the sport. I would say my second one, and I hold both of them very highly together, was my experience. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Non-Nations Cup.
I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. So at 12, I was selected for that and got to experience going to Poland with the squad and a pre-training camp in Quebec. And I was away by myself. That was my first time staying on my own, taking care of myself. And that was a really good experience. And of course, the ambassador at the time, I'm not sure about right now because I haven't followed it, was Zidane. So meeting him at a young age as well, that was great.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, Bradley, I really appreciate you joining us in studio today. It means a lot to get your story, and we want to hear more from you, so we'll probably get you back at some point.
Yeah, for sure.
But really do appreciate it, man.
For sure. Thank you for having me.
No problem. We're going to take another break here. On the other side, it is prediction time, but before we go, it is time to give away our TFC tickets. And congratulations to Jason at DOWLO84_ on Instagram. You have won a pair of tickets to see the TFC game versus Inter Miami CF next Saturday at BMO Field. Be sure to follow us at Footy First Show on Instagram, as we could be giving away more TFC tickets this season, as well as some other giveaways that we're trying to plan down the road. On the other side, it is time for predictions, where you will hear from Nico and myself, and we try to get back on track because we haven't started off great. You're listening to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Welcome back to Footy First here on TSN 1050. Nick McVicar holding it down solo today, as Nico does have a preseason game with York United that was unfortunately rescheduled to the middle of our show because, why not? But it's time for predictions here, folks, and we're still getting our feet under us with these predictions because we're struggling a little bit. Nico had a much better week last week. He picked up 2 correct guesses, getting the TFC draw as well as an Austin FC win. So he currently sits at 3-3. I, on the other hand, am not doing as well. Currently 1-5 on the year, as I only got the Austin FC victory last week correct. But I got 4 games to make it up this week. There's plenty of time. We missed the CONCACAF Champions League game last week with Vancouver and Real España, so we got to make that up now. But we're going to do 4 picks this week, 4 games. Vancouver at Real España in the Champions League, TFC at Columbus, which is our game of the week, Vancouver at FC Dallas, and Nashville apologies, Vancouver hosting FC Dallas, and Nashville hosting CF Montreal. Nico did send me his picks, and this is what he had to say.
Again, just going to start with an apology. I'm sorry I didn't make the show. I'm in Houston this week, but next week I'm there. But I'm still getting my predictions in. So, first, Vancouver in the Champions League, they're going to win. It's going to be a convincing win. Mark that one down. The 3 regular season MLS games, I'm predicting it's going to be a pretty rough weekend for Canadian MLS teams. I got Vancouver taking a draw against FC Dallas. I have CF Montreal playing Nashville. Nashville will probably take the win there, so that's my pick for that game. And Toronto FC, game of the week. They're playing Columbus, home opener. Unfortunately, I think Columbus is going to take the win, and my prediction for the score will be 2-0, as it's our game of the week. Prove me wrong, Canadian MLS teams, and I will see you next week on Footy First.
So there you have it. 4 games, 4 picks from Nico, and unfortunately, folks, I'm going to agree with him on most of these this week because I think these games are pretty obvious. But let's start with the Champions League game. I agree. I think Vancouver gets the win. I might not be as convinced as Nico of it being a convincing victory, but I'm taking Vancouver in that one. In the MLS matches this week, I agree that this one's going to be a draw. It's going to be a very close match between Dallas and Vancouver. Dallas comes in not having played in midweek, and Vancouver also has that Champions League game on Wednesday to deal with. So I think a draw. TFC at home against Columbus. This is where, let me do the Montreal game first because TFC games are game of the week. Montreal losing to Nashville. Nashville looks okay right now in the league after a draw and a win in their first 2 matches. I like them coming out with the victory here at home. And then the TFC Columbus game of the week, rivalry match. I'm going to take TFC in this one. I'm not 100% convinced, but I think they have the better chance. I'm going TFC, and I'm also going 2-1. So there it is. Our predictions for the week. If you missed any of the show, you can check it out on your favorite podcatcher or check us out on YouTube. If you want to listen back to our interviews with Mark-Anthony Kaye or Bradley Ogbevuon, those are also available via podcast and on YouTube. Listen to the prediction segment. Check out our social media at Footy First Show for anything else you are looking for. Until next week, this is Footy First on TSN 1050.